Hello and welcome. In this tutorial, I'll create Activate page. This page will have two kinds of requests: GET and POST request for activating an account. GET request will be made from the email message after successful registration. If the user didn't get the message, then activation form will be displayed. This time the user will make a POST request to send the activation link again. Let's see how to do that. Create a new page, call it Activate. Give it a meaningful title and header title. Include preferences. Include the header and check if the user is already logged in. Then there is no point in activating an activated account. Just redirect to the home page and terminate the script at this point. Create a flag variable to decide whether you want to display the activation form. Check if there is a message in the session array, then display it, remove it, and destroy the session along with the cookies for this session. Check if there is a normal message is set, then display it. Check if you want to display the activation form and include the footer. Now let's create the activation form. Action will be taken within the same page. Method is POST. Wrap the input within a paragraph tag. Create a label for the input. Create a text input. Give it a name ID. Remember that. And display the value of ID variable if it's set. Create a submit button. Give it a name Activate. Remember that name as well. Let's process the GET request. First, check for X and Y parameters. Validate X to be a valid email address and sanitize Y. If X is a valid email address and the length of Y is 32 characters, then the parameters are valid. Require the connection link. Apply real escape string on X and save it in a new variable, call it email. Create a query string to return active value for this email address and limit to one result. Send the query to the database server and save the result as a statement object. Bind the parameters to the statement object. Execute the statement. Store the returned rows. Check if one row was returned. Then the email addresses exist in the database. Next, bind the active value to the active variable. Fetch it from the statement object. Now check if the returned active value is the same value as Y. Then you have passed the second check. Finally, update users table. Set active to null. Send the query. Bind parameter. Execute. If the insert statement was executed successfully, display a success message to the user. And hide the activation form. Else, then notify the user to recheck the link. If active is equal to null value, then the account is already activated. Just notify the user. If active value is not equal to Y and not equal to null, then notify the user to recheck the link. If the email address is not there in the first place, then notify the user to recheck the link. Close the statement object, remove it, do the same for the connection link. Now let's process the post request. Check if the active button is pressed. Require the connection link, sanitize the ID value and trim it. Then apply real escape string. Save it in a variable, call it ID. I call it ID because at this point I don't know if it is a username or an email address. Let's determine if the ID is an email address by using email filter. And the length of the email address should be less than or equal to 80 characters. I'll create a function in a moment to send the activation link. This function requires 3 parameters: the ID, database connection link, and a false value to indicate that the ID is not a username. This function will return an error message if it has failed to send the activation link. So it's better to catch the message in order to display it for the user. Else, if the ID length between 5 and 50 characters, then it's a valid username. Send the activation link, pass it the ID, connection link object, and a true value to indicate that this ID is a username. Else, notify the user to enter a valid username or email. Close the connection object and delete the variable. Now let's create send activation link function. Before sending anything, just check if the IDs already exist in the database. I have to create another function to check for the record existence. I'll call it isExist. I'll pass it the ID to check and the connection link, and a flag variable to determine if the ID is a username or an email. This function will return an array. First value of the array will determine if the record exists. Second value of the array will determine whether the account is active. Account is active if the value is null. So, if the value is not null, then go to the second check. If a username flag is true, then return the third value of the array. Else, use the current ID because it's already an email address. I'll create another function to send the email. I'll pass it the ID or the email and the connection link object. On success, it will return true. Save the success message in a session variable and redirect the user to the same page. Then terminate the execution at this point. Else, if the send function returns false, notify the user about the error. If the second value of the array is null, then notify the user that the current account is already activated. If there is no such record on file, then notify the user about that. Now let's create isExist function. Create a query string to retrieve email and active values from the users table. If not a username, then where clause will be from email, else it will be from a username. Limit the return record to 1. Send the query and save the result as a statement object. Bind the parameter to the statement object. Execute the statement. Store the result on a statement object. Bind the result to a new variables, email, and active. Fetch the values from the statement object and check if the number of rows is 1, then the account exists. If the ID is a username, then return an array with the 3 values. First is a true to indicate that the account exists. Second value, the active value. Third value, the email address of the current username. If the ID is not a username, then just return 2 values without the email value. Otherwise, just return false. One last function to create is the send function. Create a new active value. Create a query string to insert the new generated active value based on the past ID. Limit the result to 1 record. Send the query to the database server and send the result as a statement object. Bind the parameter to the statement object. Execute the statement. If the insertion was successful, then you will get 1. Create a content for the email body. Send the activation link along with the email address encoded and saved as X, and the new generated active value saved as Y. Send. Return true, else return false. Let's see what we have done so far. After successful registration, you will get an email message. Within this message, you will get the activation link. When you click on the link, you will be redirected to the Activate page along with the X and Y parameters. Activation will happen according to these parameters. Several validations happened already on GET request if it has a valid X and Y parameters. If you make the same request again, you'll be notified that the account is already activated. If you accessed the Activate page directly, then nothing will happen, just displaying the activation form. If you submit a username or email, you'll make a post request. Validation on this input will be taken and then sending the activation link again by username or email. In the next tutorial, you will see how to log in and log out. Thanks for watching.